Okay, aloha and welcome to this session, which is part of the ongoing 2024 HLA conference. Thank you to everyone who has been part of the conference activities today. My name is Karina Chernisky, and I will be facilitating our time together in this room. We're honored to have Stephanie Robertson from BYUH and Haley Kearns from Binghamton University. Together, they will be presenting evolving AI instruction, analyzing and synthesizing interdisciplinary lesson plans to optimize information and data literacy in libraries.
We
A
love a
br-
long title.
it's a great wordy one. A brief bio for Stephanie and Haley is available on the conference website, so please check that out if you're interested in learning more about them. This session is being recorded and it will be available for conference registrants after the session is Paul. Please note that you are muted, but type any questions you have throughout the presentation in the chat, and Stephanie and Haley will get to that later. With that, we're over to you, Haley.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My name is Haley Kearns. I'm a digital scholarship librarian at Binghamton University, which is part of the state university system of New York. So I do digital scholarship for them. I'm specifically the digital scholarship librarian for data science and STEM. So I focus a lot on data projects, helping people with that and teaching that. So this is a project that Steph and I did because I'll let her introduce herself, but she kind of brings the instruction side of this. So Steph.
Yeah, thanks so much, Haley. I'm Stephanie Robertson. I'm outreach librarian and assistant professor at BYU Hawaii in the Joseph F. Smith Library. And for a couple of years, I co-chaired our undergraduate research conference where I would teach workshops about information literacy. I teach English 101, where I teach information literacy. So where Haley brings the digital literacy aspect, I bring the instruction, pedagogy planning, lesson planning, InfoLit aspect to our dynamic duo. Learning objectives for today. We hope that you come away with a better understanding of current teaching practices around AI, an ability to compare and contrast with legacy information and data literacy frameworks, and a proposed workshop lesson plan that is in process can hopefully be applied to your library programming. And we wanted to tie it into the theme of the conference because Kupu encompasses emergence, growth, and development, emphasizing the continuous cycle of life. And AI, as you know, is an emerging, ever-growing field in which librarians will need to continually develop alongside with in order to maintain our relevance at the forefront of digital and information literacy practices.
Yeah, so Steph and I wanted to do this project because it's both on both of our campuses. Our campuses are a little bit different, but on both of them, this is kind of a question that we hear a lot about what to do with this. So the questions that we considered were, the questions for you to consider is, what is your library doing to keep up with the ever-changing developments in AI? What do you currently know about AI and how it correlates with digital and information literacy? Which challenges will you face in programming when it comes to AI instruction in conjunction with digital and information literacy? These are kind of questions we had, and we wanted to explore them more. So I have a little slide here, kind of bringing my data science side to this, since we're going to be talking about ChatGPT, kind of thinking about what we're talking about when we talk about ChatGPT or just generative AI chatbots in general. So I kind of have the process here. So, the first step is sort of natural language processing. So texts being processed by computers with algorithms to help them understand linguistical information. This can be supervised, so you can do this yourself, or it can be unsupervised. The example I have here is topic modeling with like LDA and Top2Vec and things like that. So basically, to do the natural language processing, we have the large language models. So these are computational models that use statistics to understand the relationship between the text. For most of these generative AI projects, they're using neural networks. So your question goes in, it goes through this network of sort of understand the computer trying to understand what you're asking and ranking statistically what it thinks you want to hear. And this is done using generative AI, which we're all familiar with. This uses the large language models, which are trained on large swaths of data to predict and generate the text. I think it's always important to talk about, and we talk about this in our lesson, really drive home the fact that like the term generative AI is very misleading because it's not really generating anything. It's taking data created by human beings and then kind of piecing it together. And then kind of the product that we are all familiar with using is chatbots such as ChatGPT, or I know my campus has Copilot, Gemini. There's a bunch of these out here, but they basically create an environment for the users to interact with the algorithms and then receive statistically relevant responses based on existing data. And yes, we're going to be talking about ChatGPT today when we talk about this. All right.
Yes. So we were thinking, maybe some might think, well, why AI and libraries? I don't know if anyone would ask that question, but in the relevance in the context of our project, why does the AI question keep coming back to libraries? And Sarah and Jonathan did an excellent presentation before this about AI text analysis and the ways that they see this. And Sarah brought up a really good point about we should be at the forefront of this, and we agree. So in thinking of information literacy that's taught through the library, including skills like evaluating and citing information and research skills, it just makes sense that we would, as librarians, be very interested in this tool that, like it or not, is being used by our students. I think a couple semesters ago, I would do a lesson about how to start your own ChatGPT account, and now I just kind of chuckle. Of course, they already have an account, so they're using it. In many cases, AI is being used to do or replace research currently. So now is the time to get ahead of it, teach it properly, and be active partners in the emergence of generative AI instead of, victims of it. We don't want to be feeling like, I hear a lot of faculty sometimes just say, well, I don't use it at all, and it's just so horrible. But the truth is there are some really wonderful uses, as many of us know, because we use it. And so it's really important to teach patrons and students ethical ways to use it and beneficial ways. And this correlates with information literacy skills and digital literacy skills. Okay, here's our process. The AI, so we found 10 plans, lesson plans across platforms online, some LibGuides, a lot of LibGuides actually, and we were looking for easy to find AI lesson plans. And so part of our selection process, we were looking at audience. We wanted, and the idea of this project is that we were looking at these to kind of synthesize the best practices and main ideas to put into one really good lesson plan that took the best of them and the common denominators that seemed really important. So we're looking at audience when we selected the AI lesson plans across the internet that we found for this study. We wanted lesson plans that were geared towards students as opposed to instructors. There's a lot of lesson plans to teach instructors about AI, which is very important, but that wasn't our focus. We wanted to see what's provided there on the internet right now for instructors to take and use as a step-by-step script to teach their students or their patrons a lesson in generative AI in conjunction with research. So we were not looking for the ones that were teaching instructors about AI. We were looking at those that taught students. We did not limit our scope to just library instruction, but included all higher ed in our broad search. So it wasn't just LibGuides that we found it in different places. The format, though, through our broad search, we found some lesson plans that were more image-based and opted for text-based lesson plans with steps written out for the instructor. We looked at design. That was an important consideration. While searching, we looked specifically for lesson plans that had at least one of these three criteria: learning objectives, activities, and or assessment. Because as we'll talk about a little bit later, we were going with the Fink model of pedagogy and lesson planning, instructional design, where you start with learning objectives, then you create your activities, and then you create assessment to see if your activities met the learning goal. So we were trying to see if they have any of these. They didn't have to have all. And last but not least, we were looking at content. Each lesson we chose needed to contain instruction that would help learners develop information literacy skills and digital literacy skills.
Yeah, so here's kind of the chart of the lesson plans that we found. One interesting thing is we did like a really wide search, but every single lesson plan we found was from research, like R1 research school. So these kinds of schools are definitely at the forefront of at least publicly publishing these lesson plans. Like obviously there's probably lots of lesson plans in different learning management systems and things like that. But in terms of leading like publicly publishable ones, research universities are definitely taking the lead, which makes sense because so much research is being done there. So you can see all of these were like pretty big schools that we found them on. And we did have one, Washington University, they had a whole repository of AI lesson plans, so we chose two of them from there, but all the other ones are from different schools. Interestingly, libraries were responsible for a couple of them, but mainly it was instructional designers, so like yeah, people on campus who help others teach. Yeah, on my campus, it's like, yeah, Center for Teaching and Learning. So things like that, which makes sense because obviously they're being instructed to help people teach. So the teachers are coming to them for lessons and things like that. There was also different departments, English department, University of Pennsylvania. There was a professor there who spent a lot of time thinking about this for a couple of years, and his was probably the lesson plan referenced the most. There was also MIT has a whole AI education initiative that's like very fleshed out and had a lot of content. So in terms of format, a lot of these were just pages on a website or a LibGuide, as Steph talked about. Some of them were just like PDFs or articles that were published, including the lesson plans. Some of them had slides, and some of them even had scripts for the instructors to kind of follow. So we have the format there of all of them. But yeah, that's the overview of kind of what we found. And we didn't find as like they were harder to find than I think we expected. I think just because again, a lot of these skills are probably being taught, and not being posted online. But we did end up finding these ones. So thinking about the lesson plans, what we did is we kind of extracted all the text from all the plans, and we coded them, creating like a framework for analysis. So we coded them thinking about learning goals and objectives. So as Steph mentioned, this is something we really wanted as part of the plans. Two of the three attributes that we used according to like the teaching framework. So were they included in the lesson plan, and do they involve research? So again, we didn't look at just library lesson plans, but we did want all the lesson plans to involve finding information for research. We also coded the activities with the steps. So we didn't want just like vague things. We wanted concrete steps for people to follow because, our final goal is to synthesize them into one lesson plan. So we needed them to have steps that we could compare and contrast. And then including the scripts, slides, documents for instruction. So some of them had just had the steps written out, but some of them had additional kind of accoutrements to literally help you in the class itself. We wanted information and digital literacy relevance. So we're going to talk about the frameworks we used for that, but we coded the text for that and we related them to existing frameworks. And then we really wanted and tried to find lesson plans that included assessment. This was surprisingly hard to find. There weren't really many people like measuring effectiveness within their lesson plans, which we thought was really interesting. Partly because maybe it's assumed or it's just so pressing that it's not included. We just still don't know the outcomes of certain things. They're such new tools. But we did code for it and tried to figure out if lesson plans like knew what they were trying to achieve and stated it clearly, and tried to see if they were measuring the effectiveness as well.
Okay, so the comparative frameworks that we've referenced a couple times now, here they are. So we're looking at 3 different frameworks, obviously information literacy and digital literacy, but the pedagogy one for how we would create our amazing lesson plan that we decided is the best practices of all the information we received through this research. So in terms of the information literacy, we use the framework for information literacy for higher education from ACRL. You're probably all familiar with it if you teach information literacy and you're a librarian. So that was a natural choice for us. And Haley helped me with this one because I wasn't familiar with it since she's our digital literacy guru. Do you want to say anything about this one, Haley?
Yeah, so there are surprisingly like not a ton of digital literacy frameworks for like higher education students. So I went with a more general one. So DigComp 2.0 was a project of put United Nations here, but yeah, United Nations, and it's very extensive. It's like a 50-page framework. And it was published, I want to say within the last 10 years, but it doesn't include AI. And so the European Union actually took it and updated it last year, and included a lot of discussion about AI and how it interacts with digital literacy. So there's a couple specific, again, it's fairly long, but there's a couple specific areas that I use to kind of compare the effectiveness of the lesson plans using yeah, using the European Union one just because it's more updated.
Great. And then for pedagogy, I used this book here that we received. A lot of the faculty go through a colloquium here at BYU Hawaii, and this is it's called Creating Significant Learning Experiences and an Integrated Approach to Designing College Courses by L.D. Fink. So this is how I was trained here at BYU Hawaii to design lesson plans. And again, it's essentially that instructional design model that I talked about earlier. If you think of it like a triangle and you have your learning objectives, the activities that you think will meet those objections, but then the assessment helps you determine whether or not you actually did meet the learning objectives. And that was a really interesting finding here is the lesson plans did not have the assessment aspect of it. So that's something that we wanted to make sure we include through quiz questions or something that can be adapted to any LMS or wherever they're going to do this, so that they can assess were the goals of the lesson plan, achieved.
Okay, so we did 2 sorts of like analyses. The first we sort of did like somewhat quantitative text analysis. I did some basic just word. So we have a word cloud here. Again, we put all the lesson plans in one document. So these are like the main words from all the lesson plans that came through. I think one of the most interesting things is, again, we were looking at lesson plans that would help with research, but it wasn't mentioned as much as we thought it would be. So I have on the right throughout the text, just like the word research being used. It was less than we thought. And then, yeah, the word cloud of all of them. None of these things were super surprising. ChatGPT was definitely mentioned the most, especially out of the tools being used. I think there was only like one or two that mentioned other tools. The focus for almost all the activities was prompt crafting. So how you ask questions to the chat box, and almost all of them also included a discussion on ethics, which makes sense. They want you not only to learn how to use it, but also think about why and how and the pros and cons and the good and the bad. So that was like the basic findings from the text analysis and then from the coding. So again, we coded all of the lesson plans together. Yes, as we mentioned, none of the lesson plans really included an assessment part to measure success. So obviously, they want the students to become more familiar with the tool and using them properly, but there wasn't much mentioned beyond that, what they're trying to achieve, and also how they can measure it. I mean, I think this is a bigger question about AI and these tools, but it was interesting that that wasn't really included in any of the lessons. So these were kind of the frameworks that we used for ACRL. Authority is that were used, sorry. Authority is constructed and contextual. So this one really applied to the lesson plans discussions about like, where is this data coming from? You know, talking about, a lot of them talked about hallucination, especially with citations. Also, ACRL's searching as strategic exploration. So many of the prompting activities were talking about, you know, how do you craft a question, kind of tying it into, you know, information literacy. We're all familiar when we teach that, talking about like Boolean searching and searching databases and things like that. So it's definitely an extension, a kind of new way to think about that. For the two DigComp examples, evaluating data information and digital content, this one was talking about how you can use AI, but how do you know, if it's good information or not? And then interacting through digital technologies. So thinking about the way that, yeah, the lesson plans thought about the way that their students were learning how to interact with AI, generative AI, and kind of connect with it and use it for their research. Okay, so yes, a lot of the, after coding, a lot of the lesson plans used prompt tweaking, and a lot of the steps involve like introducing an iterative process. So you ask the question, you all ask the same question, you compare the answers. Why are they different? How can you ask this question differently to get different answers, get a better answer or a worse answer? A lot of the lesson plans discussed how the tools can be used to construct and develop your argument. Again, it's not, I think a lot of them were trying to show, you don't write your paper with this, but you can develop your argument with it, kind of helping you pin down what you want to know. Almost all of the lesson plan talks about the drawbacks of using AI, and tried to cement that it cannot replace the human process. Some of them had the discussion of where the data is coming from. And then, yes. So thinking about information literacy and digital literacy, almost all the lesson plans discussed using the tools to develop critical thinking skills, not voiding them. So again, it comes back to, this is not doing the work for you, but instead can be a tool to understand what you want to know and what you want to research. And then some of the lesson plans also included other topics such as prediction modeling. MIT's lesson plan went pretty extensively into this. And then also examining bias. That kind of went with some of the other ethical questions, but there was definitely a focus on specifically bias in some of them.
So with this information and thinking back to the original impetus for starting this project at all, which is what's available on the internet for instructors. And I had originally, when we were talking about what project we might do with AI and our different expertises, something that motivated me was conversations I've had with faculty here who some just feel like, when would I have the time to figure out AI? And I was saying, just alongside them. You don't have to be an expert, but you do need to get, so it's motivating to us to take the best practices of how these lesson plans are packaged, and if they follow the frameworks that we suggested, and to try to make it as user-friendly as possible for whoever might want to encounter this and use it. So this is an earlier draft of the workshop. There's a little more to it now that I've added in a script a bit for the instructor, more script for them with a slide deck that would eventually come with this so that they can teach about the generative AI tool alongside these activities here. So we're hoping to test these workshops out in 2025 at our 2 institutions. Haley works more with graduate students. I work more with undergrads. So we'll have and I have a lot of international students, and she has some too. So we'll have an interesting sample size to draw from. Different audiences, different institutions, but that's great because we're hoping to make this available to whoever wants it. And so they will be different audiences and different institutions. So we're hoping it's as general as can be while still being effective for multiple types of users. Okay, so we have our learning objectives here. We want them to be able, after doing this workshop, be able to define generative AI and be able to discuss the benefits, drawbacks, and ethics of using AI in research. We want them to be able to understand what data ChatGPT uses and why, including the quality of the data. And finally, our last learning objective is to demonstrate an ability to construct and develop research alongside the generative AI, including developing skills in prompting. So we're taking our lessons that we learned from the other ones, incorporating our knowledge, and we've come up with a basic learning activity. There will be some, like I said, some more dialogue added to it with the slide deck so that the instruction can be alongside the activities. But for now, we just want them to start with a basic research question, use something that students already have some knowledge of in the context of your institution. We saw someone did that, and that seemed really effective. For example, put sample question here, put, like whatever the question might be that's really common for that specific institution. And I gave some examples in a later iteration of this, but put that into ChatGPT, ask what sources their answers come from, then check the actual source, evaluate this response by comparing the results of the prompt to the actual source, what's the context or information might be missing. Ask ChatGPT about a current event, the weather today, a recent event, or a celebrity death this year. Discuss its limitations in the process by which data is collected. What could this mean for its quality? Discuss the benefits, drawbacks, and ethics of doing research this way as a group, and so on and so forth. So these different activities are meant to achieve the learning objectives. But as we create the slides built around this, we will have a better idea of what type of instruction. We have plans maybe in future directions to even, get some quantitative data from these workshops and qualitative by interviewing the students, but first by assessing what they know about these learning objectives ahead of time, and then testing them again at the end of the workshop to see, and that would be our assessment tool. Like, did we meet our goals? Did the scores improve? That would be great. And perhaps they already knew the stuff ahead of time if they're familiar with it, but that's where maybe some qualitative analysis, some open-ended interview questions of participants could come in handy to find out more nuanced learning that might take place here. So It occurred to me also recently, and I haven't even talked to Haley about this, but I was thinking like we're creating this workshop. And again, this is an earlier draft of it when we were first making the slides. So there's a bit more to it now. But it occurred to me that this is what we're coming up with based on our data. But wouldn't it be interesting if we put our lesson plan into ChatGPT, with the findings of our study and what we're hoping to achieve and to see where chat feels we could improve or what we might change or what I'm saying like it's a person, but think is effective. That's something that I'm kind of interested in too, because I know a lot of teachers lesson plan using AI. And so depending on how you feel about that, I find that to be very interesting. The group who presented before us had some really interesting ideas about using learning personas. And I hadn't really heard about that before in the context of AI. And so if Haley and I were to consider the types of students that we most encounter at our universities and created learning personas to run through ChatGPT to see if this would be an effective workshop for them, that would give us some good feedback as well, hopefully. So it's definitely all things that we're still working out and considering and hoping to get some feedback from you folks about what has worked well for you.
Yeah, so
So,
kind of our sorry, I'll just say our
no, go
next
ahead.
we're gonna get IRB approved hopefully for the spring. We're gonna teach kind of our lesson plan at both of our institutions. Like Stephanie said, we have different audiences, so we're interested to see kind of how they take it. And then, kind of come back and discuss and then yeah, see what happens. So yeah, we're happy to answer any questions. So thank you so
Or
much.
any, or if you have any feedback about it too, that you're like, have you considered this? We would love to consider it, so let us know. Is anyone doing a workshop like this at their university already? That's something I would like to know as well. Oh, there's a cat.
Sorry,
Yes.
she's very
Why
interested
would you
in your
apologize?
presentation. I did
Don't
have a
ever
question
apologize.
for you. So, could you both talk a little bit maybe about how your teams, your libraries are each kind of keeping up with the evolving landscapes related to AI and like the new
Oh,
developments, because there's just so much happening all the time.
yes. Yes. So Becky's here and Zoya's here. I don't know if Fran is here, but they've been doing some interesting things already in our library with AI where they would have students come in and sometimes it was led by them where they would have discussion. It would be an open space, a safe space to just share and ask questions. How are you using it? And to teach a bit about, and then they had a student um, running it without librarians and faculty because maybe that would be they'd feel even more comfortable to talk about. The student was very well trained to lead that discussion, and that student ended up presenting about it at a conference as well, and I think he even got an award for it. So very cool. So Becky and Zoya, Fran, really have done that for our library. Our Center for Learning and Teaching does book club about it and like a workshop series about it. And of course, we've had faculty meetings a little bit about it too, where our dean of math and computing was showing us around when it was very like new and everyone was feeling the fear that we would be out of a job or something. Um, and so, yeah, but we haven't, at our library, we haven't necessarily done it in this way yet. And when Haley brought it up, I was like, oh, Becky and Zoe are doing stuff with AI. I'm like, oh, I guess we should all be doing stuff with AI. So, sure, yeah, let's do this. So, I'm excited about that. Maybe Haley could talk about her institution.
Yeah, so I personally I teach like data science related workshops. So we don't haven't really done much with AI, but we do a lot with like text analysis and data analysis and statistics. But I and our Center for Learning and Teaching also does one. But so SUNY this like kind of like UH, except there's 64 schools. They are very I guess concerned or thinking about this. So we currently have an information literacy gen ed um requirement. So they're talking about adding an AI component. They want to do it for next fall. I don't think that's very reasonable. So like for our AI instruction, we do talk a little bit about AI, but it's not very comprehensive. And then my campus specifically is kind of there's a lot of people working on AI in data science who are on like a statewide um, sort of thing, group initiative. There's a lot of stuff. SUNY's like really investing in data projects in general, including AI. I'm on like a working committee in the library for AI, thinking about the gen ed and how it can be included in instruction. And then there's also a statewide, there's like a statewide AI for people who actually write it, and then there's a statewide one for people who teach it and instruct. So I am also part of that too. So there's a lot of different things going on the campus. Um, but it's also surprising like how much gets through the cracks too. And I did a study last semester and I talked to like a bunch of people on campus and it wasn't about AI, but it was a common theme through all the interviews, talking about students using it, how they can teach students to use it. So I think that kind of is what inspired me to do this with Steph too, to give them resources.
If there are any other questions, feel free to add those to the chat. You are also welcome to unmute yourself and directly address those to our presenters. While people maybe are thinking about that, I had wanted to pose another question. And so this is for both of you as well. There are lots of possible challenges, right, related to AI instruction, specifically thinking about AI instruction in relationship to like information literacy, digital media literacy as well. What are some of the main challenges you foresee in trying to
That's a
incorporate that
great
more?
question. Yeah, it's a great question. In my English 101 class this week, I had them do an exercise where they all put the same prompt into chat. And then they shared their answers on Canvas. And then when we came to class, we pulled up multiple of them and saw, oh, you all got different responses with very similar themes. So which response is better? Which one would I grade better? Which one's more interesting? So you're really taking a gamble by just letting it write your papers for you. Does it actually reflect your point of view? Does it actually, how do you know that the response is accurate? And I was kind of surprised at how some of the students didn't consider how necessarily where exactly it's coming from and how do you know that it's accurate, when many of us who've taught information literacy for the last however long are very familiar with talking about here's how we can look on Google Scholar for a source, and then how do we evaluate these sources to know, well, it's peer reviewed and it's this and that, and so the same kind of techniques apply, but where is the information coming from? And some of them didn't even know that it could hallucinate. So I had them vote with their feet. Stand up, go to that wall if you just don't trust the information where it comes from at all. Go to that wall if you totally trust it. You can't be directly in the middle, but you can be somewhere on the spectrum. And so they stood different parts in the room, and there was two that were adamant about they don't trust it at all. And they had really good reasons. They'd used it for math and things like that. So I don't know if it's answering exactly what you would ask, but I anticipate just the trust that people put in it, might not be warranted, but then maybe some of the mistrust and the confusion about it might be a challenge as well. And my own children all say, "Oh, look up look up this thing for me online, and they'll go and they'll look it up on ChatGPT, and I'm like, wait, why aren't you Googling that? Oh, because I'm just going to get it here. I'm like, well, what if it's not right? It's always right. I'm like, ChatGPT is always right. Oh, I don't know. So we're just, depending on how someone's been introduced to it, what is their level of acceptance for what they're getting? How do we get them to evaluate it, to synthesize it, to understand where it's coming from, and use those information literacy skills? So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of summarize what she said. And I think turning it into a passive tool, from a passive tool into like an active critical thinking, jumping off point, I think can be hard, especially when you have students who do use it for every little thing and they're used to just trusting it. Another, I will say, from like the digital scholarship data science side is like explaining it to people and getting people to understand how it works, and it can be really scary. Again, I do a lot of teaching text analysis, and like people are just like scared of coding if they haven't done it, and like then kind of scaffolding that to help understand what's kind of going on. It can be very intimidating, but I don't think impossible. So yeah, I think it's worthwhile.
And I like what Melissa said in the chat about she's not an academic librarian, but she's in public libraries. She popped in to see if there's something we could present at the public library, adapt into a teen program. I think that would be perfect. Teen program, yes, get them with their teens. And then she could see a lot of folks being interested in this. Perhaps she can see if AI could adjust for public programs. That's the idea. We were doing, we were looking at higher ed when we were gathering our information, and we were seeing what one of them I think even produced it where it could be for teens, but it was created by MIT. And so yeah, it could, the idea is that hopefully this can be adaptable to as many people as possible, and AI could actually help with that too if it's not totally adaptable.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie and Haley. And for all of you that chose to attend this session, thank you for participating. Thank you for providing feedback for Stephanie and Haley about their project. Please know that, that feedback is very important to them. So take a few moments if you are able to provide actual like written feedback. The evaluation link is on the conference schedule. So you will just want to navigate to their session and then click on that. That will still be live for a couple days after today. So think about what you might want to share with them. To everyone, thank you so much for participating in this session and for joining the conference activities. For those of you that will be joining us tomorrow, I look forward to seeing you at the Ho'okupu Center. And thank you again, Stephanie and Haley.
Thank you so much. We had a great time.